Today we're naming names, and Nebraska ball is 20-0.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets when you win that first bet.
All right, welcome in. It is Monday. You have found the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. Welcome back from the weekend, everyone. We're going to start the show with football today because this is at its core a football podcast. We talk about football 52 weeks a year. But this week, we are also going to talk about basketball, maybe more than at any time we have in nearly 2 years of doing this podcast. Correct, Connor?
Yes, I had the great honor. I was so excited to do this on Saturday, right after Nebraska basketball finished off their dominant second half at Minnesota. I got the great pleasure of updating the fans inside Pinnacle Bank Arena who were there.
Oh, yeah, the women's game was going on.
And saying they are 20-0 to a rousing applause.
Yeah, I heard that they played the game on the video screens in the pregame of the women.
Funny enough, we had some live video malfunctions on Saturday, and so if we would not have been playing the game, before the women started, we wouldn't probably have known that we were having live video problems. At which point it would have been a way more significant problem, to just find out about during the game. So Nebraska ball saved a lot of lives on Saturday.
Nebraska men's basketball is just continuing to do the yeoman's work. Is it true that the Nebraska students there were more of them than usual at the women's game because it was a prerequisite to attend that game in order to get tickets for the men's games?
So they did a thing, the marketing team, I thought it was a great idea, where they get priority access to the men's game if you go to the women's game. And there ended up being almost 300, I think, students or two something or something like that. And they'll get access to sit over on that side instead of back behind the basket on the baseline, which is awesome.
Yeah, and the next two home games are against Illinois and Purdue, top 10 teams or top 12 teams, maybe top 10 teams come Monday, today. We'll see. But we're going to talk hoops. And if you come to us primarily for football and care about football, we will still provide you with that fix. But as Connor said, the Nebraska basketball team is 20-0 and playing now officially for a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So we're going to spend some time on that. You should savor this moment because it may come around only once in a lifetime or less often than that in the case of this Nebraska program. But that said, let's start with a couple of football items. So we want to move outside of Nebraska and outside of the Big Ten for this first story that we're going to discuss, and it involves the ACC and the SEC last Friday. This is great. This is going to be one of the more memorable moments in all of 2026 that happened here in the first couple of weeks of the calendar year. So Dabo Swinney, the Clemson coach, lost a player in the portal on the final day to Ole Miss. His name is Luke Farrelly. He's a linebacker who was the ACC Defensive Freshman of the Year in 2025. He did that at Cal, and then Farrelly transferred to Clemson earlier this month. He enrolled in school and started attending classes. He signed a contract with Clemson. Got all that?
Yep. So far, so good.
And Ole Miss kept recruiting him because the portal was still open until a week ago last Friday, January 16th. So Dabo decided to just lay the whole thing out there. And this is where it gets a lot different than any of the other situations that have probably unfolded in similar fashion behind the scenes. So Swinney started naming names. He had the times, and the details and the text messages that were sent and the conversations and the cars that were driven and the color of clothes that were worn, for everything, all of the contact between his GM and the Ole Miss GM and the player's agent. And Dabo just called a press conference and put it all out there, how the player, Farrelly, assured Clemson that he was not going back in the portal, that he was happy at Clemson, and how Pete Golding, the new Ole Miss coach, kept pressuring the player, and how Golding had Trinidad Chambliss, the Ole Miss quarterback from last year, and Jackson Dart, amazingly, the New York Giants quarterback who played at Ole Miss, call Farrelly and try to convince him to go back into the portal. Dabo explained that Golding sent Farrelly a picture of a $1 million contract on his phone while Farrelly was sitting in his 8 a.m. class at Clemson University. Dabo told that Ole Miss then doubled the offer, $2 million for 2 years, and how Farrelly's agent was involved in the conversations, and according to Dabo, tried to make a deal with Clemson to get another $1 million out of Clemson after the contract had been signed, in order to in exchange for nixing the talks with Ole Miss. This is just wild. Clemson declined that offer, and then on the day the portal closed, late in the afternoon, after Farrelly had said, no, I'm staying at Clemson, he, of course, entered the portal and went to Ole Miss.
What a story.
What?
Okay, so here's the thing. I think that I don't know, maybe I don't know if the listeners will be surprised to hear this or not, but like, this is standard operating procedure in college football now. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if it's that obvious. I don't know if it's that egregious. I don't know if it's that documentable, but like, you know, this is how it goes. And
it was
Dabo,
happening to Ole Miss on the other end, because Lane Kiffin and LSU are pillaging the Ole Miss roster.
Yeah. And Dabo, you know, he took he went up to the podium and he created a podium and said, I've had enough of this. I'm about to do something. Now, the question is, what did he do? He lit a fire, obviously, and now there's at least like something to point to. There's something to quote unquote investigate or whatever. But ultimately, this comes back to, you know, it all comes back to the same thing, which is freedom of player movement and all that stuff. And over and over and over again, the players have won in their eligibility cases, whether it's going to other schools or getting more years of eligibility against the courts and things like that. They've won ability to make more money and ability to play wherever they want. I don't know what changes here. Like I don't know if the NCAA can finally step in and do something about this now that they have the evidence handed in front of them on a silver platter. I doubt it. But at the very least, it created more of a conversation.
Maybe a hand slap. Tampering is a crime that usually goes unpunished in college football and college basketball, because in other college sports, because so much of it happens that you can't enforce it all. Perhaps the NCAA or the SEC and Clemson got the SEC and the ACC commissioners involved in this last week too, which is another twist. But they could the NCAA could choose to make an example out of Ole Miss and Golding, because Clemson is just going to hand over all of this evidence, already has done that, to the NCAA. That's neither here nor there, because if they do get slapped on the hand, it's not going to matter. They're not going to necessarily change their practices, and certainly other teams, LSU, whoever it might be. And I say LSU because that's the example that comes to mind that directly involves Ole Miss on the other side. They're not going to change their practices. What I do think that will happen maybe is that the next time a team or a coach thinks about messing with a Clemson player in the brazen manner undertaken by Ole Miss here in this situation, they might think twice and go somewhere else, just because Sweeney has shown the willingness to go outside the box and like delete the bro code and just say, nah, we're going to turn you in. Like Sweeney said, we warned Ole Miss and told them if they kept doing this, we were going to turn them in. And Ole Miss just doubled down and said, yeah, we're going to keep doing it. And it worked.
But like, the question is then what comes? Yeah, maybe Clemson's they're defending themselves, obviously, but like, what then happens if it's just a slap on
Everybody
the wrist?
can start naming names. I mean, you could do that, and we.
But what's the point?
Really,
like, obviously, like, do we think less of Ole Miss today? Just like morally, sure, probably, but that doesn't matter. Well, that doesn't matter.
I mean, all Golding has to say, if he's, if he's holding a press conference on the late signing day, or the next time that he has to answer to the public or the media, and this comes up, he can just say, we're just a player in this. Like, we're just doing the same thing that everybody is doing to us. And this is just an instance where somebody decided to air the dirty laundry. Matt Rhule has said numerous times that his players get called all the time, that they've got all kinds of offers out there, and this player could command this much money. And some of them choose to go in the portal and leave. You just had Keona Davis this last week, who went in the portal several weeks ago, but he ended up at Miami, which is one of the schools that is notorious for paying big bucks. I guess not notorious, like Miami pays big bucks. I don't know that Miami tampers necessarily any more than anyone else, so wouldn't want to put them in that category. But they're definitely like in the upper echelon of teams in like the activities that go on around the portal. So Keona Davis is going to Miami, and lots of players have lots of options, and Matt Rhule's talked about it, but those are relatively hollow comments because he doesn't name names, and nobody has really named names here until we got Dabo Swinney going up there and just flat out calling out Pete Golding and Ole Miss and their GM and the agent. The stuff with the agent was incredible. Like, he was basically trying to extort Clemson, and it didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, so like I said, it might make the ground a little bit shakier underneath things. I don't know that it's going to stop anyone from continuing to operate as we've operated recently. Like, that's the thing here. Like, not to downplay the entire thing here. I'm certainly I'm happy to hear it. I think it creates drama around the sport in a time in the off season where we like that. Yeah, that's a good thing.
The last thing we'll say here, and we'll take a break, is I saw some comments on social media that Clemson was just getting what it deserved because of the situation that involved Andy Berberia, the Iowa Western player who was committed to Nebraska and then flipped to Clemson. Totally different. Andy Berberia had not signed with Nebraska. He hadn't signed anything with Nebraska, and had certainly not enrolled in school at Nebraska. If we're going to start calling out programs for continuing to recruit committed players, well, I mean, that's every coach in the world will gladly admit that they continue to recruit committed players. That happens everywhere. And that's all that happened with the defensive tackle from Iowa Western as it relates to Clemson and Nebraska.
Yep. All right, let's take a break on those 20-0 Cornhusker basketball team coming up next. But first, a word from the FanDuel Sportsbook. Last call for football on FanDuel. One game left, one final Sunday. The final chance to get on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. So, as of the taping of this, we don't know who is going to be in that game. We know one of the participants. We don't know the other at this point. So maybe this is even a good time, although you won't be hearing this until Monday morning. This is a good time to jump in on that early line on FanDuel. See what you like there, or wait until the last second, or heck, even during the game. It's up to you. The Super Bowl is known for its many, many props and many, many things to wager on. There are going to be all those opportunities out there for you on 2 weeks from yesterday. So if you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. If you win, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, it's all over. Last call for football on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, welcome back, and thanks for making Locked On your first listen today, and the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. 20-0. Once again, recording this a little bit early, so we don't know the We don't know the ranking, and by the time you listen to this, you probably won't know it either, but likely in the top 5 for Nebraska basketball as they set up for a what would Ket Pavelka say? A gigungus week,
ginormous. Whatever word you want to come up with, it applies to this week for Nebraska with Michigan and Illinois on the schedule.
So they won on the road after a little bit of a slow first half at Minnesota. Minnesota shot the crap out of the ball in the first half, and Nebraska just they stemmed it as they always do, stuck right in there, and ended up with a 19-point win. And they were down by 8 at about 17 minutes to go in the ball game, and then went on a 44-17 run to close out the game.
Same thing that happened at Indiana. Similar thing that happened at Northwestern.
Yep. Fred Hoiberg said it in the locker room at halftime, as we saw in the cinematic recap. We've been a second half team all year, so they obviously answered the bell on that one. And we wondered what would happen without Braden Frager. And we theorized on this podcast, hey, maybe it's a little bit more Cale Jacobson, and he got his time on Saturday, that's for sure. Yeah, but the guy who stepped up into his spot as far as the playmaker was concerned was Bryce Sanford, who was everywhere. 22 points, 10 boards, excellent from 3 as he always is. And Sam Hoiberg kept them afloat, I think, in the first half as well. Whichever way you want to cut it, it's 20-0 going into Nebraska ball's game of the century Tuesday at Michigan.
Yeah, they tried to go with Jared Garcia. We're going to now move into the part of the show that we've never done, where we actually break down basketball.
I love it.
They tried to go with Jared Garcia as that replacement on the wing for Braden Frager, and he played 5 minutes in the first half and took a couple of ill-advised shots, committed a couple fouls, and Hoiberg took him back, brought Garcia back to the bench and said, we'll try you another day, but we're going with a 6-man rotation the rest of the way. And it was the 5 starters and Cale Jacobson, who played 25 minutes in this game. And I'm amazed every time I watch Cale Jacobson play because of how good he is. And for being 6'4" and having to guard post players, he doesn't get roasted very often at all. Now that may be different on Tuesday night at Michigan, which has a history this year of beating the pants off of just about everybody that it plays. It did lose at home. The Wolverines did a couple of weeks ago to Wisconsin, which is playing a lot better since its 30-point loss at PBA. But this is a different kind of Michigan team, and it's a different kind of environment that Nebraska's going into. And the Huskers have played at Illinois and won at Illinois and had Frager for that, and smoked Wisconsin at home and beat Michigan State at home. So they're capable of doing anything that's out there in the Big Ten. But like we'll continue to say, they're not going to go undefeated this year. There are 11 regular season games left, and Nebraska has done it so far for 20 somewhere. Okay, so let's back up. 2 weeks ago, when Nebraska was 16-0 and came off of that stretch where I think a lot of people expected they would lose, going on the road in 1 week in the same week to Ohio State, coming back home, and then going on the road again to Indiana. Like, yeah, they couldn't get through that undefeated. And they came back home and they were 16-0. And I said on this podcast, they're not going to get to 20-0 when they play Michigan. Somewhere in one of these next 4 games, the Huskers are going to lose. And they won all those games by double digits and absorbed the loss for the last basically half of that 2-game stretch without arguably the most dynamic player on the roster, like the player who has been the best, other than maybe Bryce Sanford of late, at just changing the complexion of games whenever he comes onto the court. So they continue to defy all expectations. And here we go. It's going to be huge, 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 huge on Tuesday night, but not huge, not more huge than what is coming down the road in March. March is going to be the hugest of all. Like this 4-game stretch right here, where Nebraska's got Michigan 18-1, and then Illinois, and then at Rutgers, and then Purdue at home. So these 2 home games against highly ranked teams. That's incredible when you pair it with the Michigan game. But March is where March is where it's at. Like March is where this thing is really, really, really insane. Right.
So yeah, I mean, this week is unbelievable. So Nebraska is already opened up as an 11.5 point underdog at Michigan on Tuesday, which I find to be sizable and mildly insulting. To be honest with you, like I don't know, it doesn't mean Michigan can't do that, but come on. I mean, I don't know. So I think Nebraska will have a good plan for Michigan, and they'll roll the ball out there and see what happens. And then Illinois on Sunday, Nebraska's called for a wideout. Illinois has a game on Thursday at home before they come to Nebraska on Sunday. And, their last game over the weekend on Saturday featured Keaton Wagler scoring 46 points at Purdue. And
freshman from Kansas City.
Yeah. Oh my God. He was unbelievable. So, I mean, if you get to it, like, I feel like we just keep kicking the can down the road here, but like, if you somehow get to Sunday undefeated, I don't know that we have seen, I mean, this is all uncharted territory, but this will be a scene times 11 on Sunday at Pinnacle Bank Arena, and it will be either way because you're fighting for a Big Ten title at this point. That's
your 20-1.
That's the main thing, right? Like we're one seed, like all that stuff. It's all on the table. Big Ten title is right there in front of you. Go get it.
Yeah. Understand that if you're 20-1 coming home on Saturday against, or is that Sunday against Illinois, coming home for the weekend against Illinois. That's still every bit as wild and crazy for that return home, and in some ways maybe even a little bit more because you want them to bounce back if Nebraska were to lose on Tuesday at Michigan. Michigan, by the way, and maybe explaining that point spread just a bit. Michigan this year won by 30 against Auburn, won by 40 against San Diego State,
Gonzaga.
won by 40 against Gonzaga. And 28 over Villanova. A lot of 40 and 50 point wins here. 30-point win against USC. As of late, they I think the scouting report has probably started to come in on this Michigan team. Nebraska will have them scouted well, but their last few games have been a little bit more reasonable since the loss to Wisconsin. Before that, Michigan won by 2 at Penn State, and then they beat Washington by 10, just like Nebraska did. That was a road game. Oregon by 10, beat Indiana by 14 at home, and then won by 12 against Ohio State on Friday in Ann Arbor. So it's not, they haven't been destroying teams by 30 and 40 points in the Big Ten of late. But it's clearly a team with a ton of firepower and the ability to just to beat anybody in the country.
Yeah, like I mean, I get it. I get it. But Nebraska will have a plan for Landeborg and they've been pretty effective at shutting down those. Maybe not a big like as quite as versatile as he is, because he steps out and shoots the three and he does it at a pretty good rate. But if Nebraska can run them off the 3-point line and do their thing defensively, they're going to be right in that thing in a really tough environment on Tuesday.
I want to point out, and we don't have the AP poll yet. As you mentioned, it'll be out midday on Monday. But with Purdue losing twice last week and the Boilers were ranked 4th, and then Houston going down, number 6 ranked Houston on Saturday against Texas Tech, Nebraska will likely be 5 in the AP poll today. So it's a top 5 matchup. Michigan was ranked number 3 last week and held serve. This is going to be a top 5 that includes Arizona, Michigan, Duke, UConn, and Nebraska. So that's quite a group of basketball blue bloods right there. In fact, those 5 teams, Connor, have combined for 13 national championships and 328 NCAA tournament victories. And so have the top 4.
And a handful of national championships in the last 10 years or 15 years. So
they've all won championships except, of course, Nebraska, which has not won an NCAA tournament game.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break, come back, and we have a little more basketball to get to, some questions about this Nebraska team as it heads into this incredibly amazing, awesome stretch over the next 2 weeks. That is next. All right, this is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to score than what's on screen. So in this segment of the ad read, for several weeks moving forward, we're going to highlight a player, a coach, a fan, or even a moment that defines what matters in sports. And this week, we can't think of a better first pick for this spot than Sam Hoiberg. He is always moving the game forward with his play on defense, with his spark on offense, with that savvy leadership that he shows for Nebraska on the court. Sam Hoiberg is showing that he has what it takes to raise the bar. And the results of his extra work done off the court never disappear. Hoiberg dials in every detail. He provides fire, and he gives that I never quit kind of grit. Mazda puts that same passion into every model of every vehicle. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, welcome back. Monday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. Before we finish the show with more basketball talk, I want to mention that Matt Rhule over the weekend, Nebraska's football coach, offered a scholarship to a quarterback from Orange Lutheran High School in California, the same school that produced TJ Lateef. And Rhule did this in person. It was on camera and spread around on social media. It was a historic moment, because the quarterback was McKenna Cook. Yes, she is the captain of the USA Junior Flag Football National Team, a junior in the class of 2027. Cook is the first flag football player ever offered a Power 4 scholarship in the history of football. Cool distinction for her to now own. She is interestingly committed to Georgia to play soccer. Two-sport star there, McKenna Cook. So we'll see. She will be a freshman in college in the year that Nebraska debuts its women's flag football program, the spring of 2028. So 27-28. Nebraska does not have a coach yet for flag football, which is why Rhule made this scholarship offer. Can Nebraska flip her from Georgia soccer?
Is Rhule like technically like the acting coach?
Yes. How
does it work? How do you offer a scholarship with no coaching staff? That's pretty. I mean, it's great. The video was incredible. But
scholarships have been offered by lots of people who weren't actually on the coaching staff. I remember when Bill Callahan was fired way back 20 years ago plus. No, not plus, not even 20 years ago, like 19 years ago at Nebraska. Tom Osborne, who was the athletic director at the time, he made some scholarship offers. So he wasn't the coach of the team, technically. And Matt Rhule, he's kind of acting as the senior statesman that he is, and went out to Orange Lutheran, and I don't know. He probably had some business with his team out in Southern California. I could imagine too, because coaches are on the road recruiting right now. And he stopped into a school that was familiar to him because he has a QB from those same hallways, and said, "Let's do this with McKenna Cook." So, I don't know if she wants to play flag football in college or she wants to just go to Georgia on scholarship, but she would definitely be more well known if she chooses you can't say that for sure. She could go on and be a star in soccer, but you would walk in the door with quite an achievement already reached if she comes to Nebraska and plays quarterback.
All right. Yep. So we'll be on quarterback watch for Nebraska flag football for the next year and a half. They have their sights set. The targets are out there.
It was kind of did you see the video? It was kind of awkward.
He was like, I've been sent here by somebody to offer you a scholarship. All right, here you go.
Mr. Dannon has sent me here. I've been sent here by the world of women's flag football to Los Angeles, which will host the 2028 Olympic Games, where flag football will debut. It was interesting, and she seemed to be into it. So I haven't offered any 2026 grads yet. Nebraska is going to have flag football players on campus this coming fall, even though they won't have a team to get things started. So Cook would be Cook's class would be the second class of incoming freshmen on the flag roster. All right, enough flag football. Let's get back to a sport that's actually being played right now. I want to ask you what you think is realistic for Fred Hoiberg's team in this 2-week stretch ahead. At Michigan, Illinois at home, at Rutgers, Purdue at home. What is realistic? And don't just, I don't want just like, well, they've won every game so far. Like what can we expect from Nebraska in the next 2 weeks?
I mean, I guess I wouldn't, it's a really tough stretch, obviously. But those 2 home games against Illinois and Purdue are
winnable.
Yeah, of course they are. And I like I said before, I would have to be proven otherwise at this point to why Nebraska can't go on the road and win. There's nothing, like it's going to be difficult for them to do any one of those things. And then there's a game at Rutgers, which is sort of sneaky, on I suppose next Saturday. At this point, the Saturday after next, the 7th. So like anything, realistically, I guess a loss, one out of the next 4, or I suppose. But
that'd be great. I think that would be great.
I wouldn't be surprised if they made it through unscathed.
I would be surprised if they made it through unscathed. I think that 3-1 in that stretch would be remarkable, would be fantastic. You to get 2 wins the caliber of what they would if they go 3-1. I mean, I assume you're not going to go 3-1 and have the loss be Rutgers, but that could happen.
I suppose.
Yeah. I considering what we're going to talk about next, it would be all that much more remarkable to come out of that thing at 24-0, because Nebraska, as we mentioned earlier, played against Minnesota with a 6-man rotation. Cale Jacobson being the only player off the bench who saw more than 5 minutes of action in that game. And we know that Braden Frager did not make the trip to Minneapolis, that it's a left ankle sprain. And Fred Hoiberg has said that he is responding well. And Frager had an injury somewhat similar, maybe not as severe, but it was an ankle injury back early in the season and came back. I think what was earlier that we didn't miss any games, but he was expected to be somewhat limited in the game against Oklahoma up in Sioux Falls, and he played, and then he played very well in Kansas City right after that time. So he has some history of coming back from this, although considering that it's the same ankle, I believe it's the same ankle. I could be wrong on that. He might have, it may have been the other ankle. He wears a like a sleeve on his right leg, but so I could be wrong. He may have injured both ankles at this point, or it could be a re-injury. But anyway, he's come back from this in short order in the past. So I would expect that he's not going to be able to play on Tuesday after not making the trip to Minneapolis. And then, you really hope that you could have him on Saturday. But even that, I think is hoping, is very optimistic at this point.
Yeah. That's definitely one of the things you're watching around this time of year. Like what's your rest situation look like, and how can you get guys off your feet? And if you're working with the shorter rotation, then obviously that's a factor too. Nebraska does have almost an entire week off after the Illinois game.
Yeah, that'd be a good time for him to come back. Yeah.
And then coming back, is a pretty quick turnaround after an East Coast trip Saturday to Tuesday against Purdue. So, like you're trying to manage all that stuff around this time of year. But like I said before, I mean, you're chasing after a Big Ten title at this point, and there's no reason to believe that Nebraska's not going to be one of the teams who's right in the mix there. Obviously, they have a nice, heads up on everybody at this point. Michigan can tie it up, this week, assuming everything, kind of holds. Well, no, that'll be the next game. And then Nebraska's already beat Michigan State, who has one loss, and Nebraska's already beat Illinois, who has one loss. And then they get Purdue, who's already got 2. So, you're just jockeying for position with all those teams at this point. So every game against one of those teams, which you play them all in the next week or 2, is going to be gigantic.
Yeah. All right, much more basketball to discuss. We'll table the rest of our topics that were scheduled for today until the show on Tuesday as we preview Nebraska at Michigan. And of course, continue to follow all the developments that are happening on the Nebraska sports world. We will continue to talk about football as well. Thanks for tuning in today to Locked On Nebraska. Be sure to join us tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday and all week. And make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Nebraska so you get all the latest updates. For those of you on video, we're going to send you right now to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast YouTube channel. On audio, make your second listen the Locked On College Football Show. Thanks for joining us today.